So according to Bruins interim head coach Joe Sacco, Trent Frederic is considered, quote, week to week after leaving Tuesday's Bruins game with a lower body injury. But the sense is that it won't change any plans ahead of the trade deadline. It doesn't trade plans. The tough part for the Bruins, it affects the trade value.
Yeah. And it's going to change the shape of what they can get. And we just circle back to the cautious approach. Brick broke it down so perfectly, I would say, on the Hockey Hub. But if you have a cautious approach, the next thing that's going to impact everything is what value you can get for whom. Yeah. And, what moves are you going to make now that you can hold on to over the course of the next couple of seasons, or a move you're just going to make for now and then get it off the table this summer? So it's going to be tough because there is value, I think, to Trent Frederick tremendously. I know we've typically seen him as a bottom six guy, but system changes everything. And we've seen a lot of possibility, maybe more so last season than this season, but a lot has changed this season, which is going to change the style of play for a number of players. But that's going to be tough for this Bruins organization. And
this is a guy who's bottom six, playing left wing, and he could play center as well for a team. There's a lot of teams that would want him, though. 26 years old. The versatility in his position to play up the middle or play out on the left wing with his right shot. Really tough. Brings a lot of hits to the ice. So you saw a lot of teams, like, he just makes sense as a fit.
Right.
Like a depth piece for those teams in the playoff picture making a push. Like the Red Wings would certainly like to look at him. They could use help on the left wing, especially on their third line. Even think of the Wild, or there could be teams like maybe the Devils that just want to get a boost. Same thing with the Rangers. The teams that make sense to buy. But then, and he would probably get, I would say, a second rounder return. The tough part is he was having a dip in his play.
Right.
40 points last season, 31 points the season before, at 15 right now, and just not producing. But it's hard given like the line he's playing on, the lack of production. It's throughout this whole team. So the trade value wasn't that high for him as he's set to become a free agent after the season. This just makes a bigger hit. So does that second round pick become a third? Our team's not spooked by it. That's the thing of like week to week is so ambiguous.
My gosh.
Because a week to week could be next week he's good, 3 weeks he's good. And for teams that are holding on to a wild card spot or just on the outside, they can't afford a down week, especially for someone they're trading for and giving up draft assets for.
Yeah, they're going to drive up the negotiations, which is just going to take a lot of things off of the table.
Yeah.
But kind of circling back to what you mentioned, like a lot of the movement, him playing on that third line, you're also talking about somebody who's kind of carried the responsibility of playing with younger players still, looking for a lot more development in their game. So when you have all of these other factors that are playing into an already kind of, different season, it's going to change the nature of your game. And that's probably what I would hope the Bruins can try to, if this is the piece they're trying to move, I hope that this is the selling point that they can kind of make here, is like, you've seen what he can do. You've seen the leader that he's had to be on the third line, the inconsistency of who he's had to play with, and basically how he's had tried to elevate the guys around him. But with there being, some identity changes with this Bruins team, you can't really expect a lot out of a guy like Frederick. So I would say that to say that it shouldn't bring down his value, especially because I really think he can make an impact. I mean, the Canucks is another team that's been kind of kicked around in terms of bringing him in. I think they could use him a lot because you kind of need more physicality on your bottom six if you're the Canucks team, and you're still trying to, they've had health issues with their goalies. They have a lot of offensive defensive structure when it comes to their D zone. So Trent Frederick really fits the bill in terms of like coming in and helping right away. And they kind of have the wiggle room money wise and kind of can go back and forth negotiation when it comes to those draft picks.
Yeah, if you put him in Vancouver, he slots in next to Suter and Bozer. I don't know if I'm saying Bozer right. The right winger on the third line. Besser, thank you. But that's a high scoring line, which elevates his game because there's not a lot of production happening around him in Boston.
Right.
You get him in a higher scoring production between Besser and Suter next to him. He slots into that left wing line, a left wing of that line. Those are also experienced guys. Like you point out, he plays with young guys. If you get him to the Red Wings on the third line, like Vladimir Tarasenko is putting in a lot of minutes for them as a depth piece.
Yep.
So all of a sudden you have a younger center, but it's Tarasenko on his right side. And then you have a Trent Frederic who has a lot of hockey experience on his left side. Like that's where I look at these teams that are in the playoff pictures and just need more depth scoring. But the part with him too, and why I liked him as a Bruin, he's more than depth scoring. It's the toughness. It's the hits. He's a guy that will drop gloves. He will give his team juice. He will also have his teammates' backs. There's a lot of value around him. And I think that's the best point. And that's why I go what's the week to week?
Right.
Because if it's 1 week, I don't think the value takes a hit because he does a lot more than score. He does a lot more than add toughness. He just a very well-rounded game. He's a good skater and at a very young age too.
Yes, and that's what I love. I love how old he is, and circling back to the physicality, because when we're looking at the compete required once you get into the playoffs and let alone the Stanley Cup finals, you're looking for teams that can be more physical. I mean, that's why the Panthers were the force that they were. They were so physical. They were exhausting to play against. They wore down their opponent, and Frederick's one of those guys that can really jump in on the forechecking action. Kind of makes smart back-checking plays, but, certain games we haven't seen it as much. But, again, the right system can just elevate all that out of him. And I love that you point out the lines when it comes to the Canucks as well as the Red Wings. I think it would behoove him to be with guys that can elevate his play rather than him being relied on to elevate the rest of the line. That just might not be a strong suit at this point in his career. Yeah,
and it's at this point, if you sell, and for a team too, if they put him into a line, maybe they don't want to re-sign him. They just want to bring him in, trade him, and then maybe agree to him on an extension, but you want to get the best out of him. It increases his value long term as well.
Right.
For a team too, if they put him in a spot where he can flourish. And I think I keep going back to Detroit because it's been so long since they've been good.
Yeah.
And it's finally all coming together for them. Like Larkin and Raymond and Mo Sider. But you added Trent Frederic, they drafted well. They drafted well with those guys. And then you add where you need to. You fill in the holes where you need to. And someone like a Trent Frederic can elevate that team a ton. I wonder too, though, it's this injury as well. It gives the opportunity. The two names that come into on the Bruins prospects is John Farinacci, Georgi Murkolov, both 24 years old, good scorers. Farinacci's his second year with the Providence Bees. But these are the guys that, Frederick's out. Do they get more run? Do they get more time on the ice? And they have to, because the flip side for the Bruins, what do you do with Trent Frederic? Okay, he's going to be out no matter what.
Right.
This is the NHL experience you need for these prospects, because these prospects need to start becoming professionals if the Bruins want to get back on track to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, and at some point you really have to give a hand to the development. You really got to test out where these guys are so that you can see the nature of what their play is going to be now or how it's going to grow. And I think for a team that there's some wiggle room because the cap space does have that 5% increase coming up. So there's ways to finesse some things. But if you can save yourself some money in terms of giving development that time and that effort and that energy, then you're going to get a better big picture. I think it all just comes back down to the fact of finding that identity. And I'd hate to compare it to the Rangers, but it's kind of the same thing. You've got some guys in development at the farm team and you're just kind of waiting to see when's their moment going to be. You pull them up for a second and then you leave them back down there to develop. And you don't realize what the identity of this team is going to be in the course of the next year. And it's going to help answer a lot of questions to see where those guys are at. But either way, they're going to have to bring in another presence. Definitely. I think they need another veteran in this locker room to help.
Yeah, they can't they can't go into next season solely with prospects coming up and figure they need bona fide NHL guys. They have a good amount of cap space, I think $22 million, and then you mentioned it's going to go up by 5%. Greg Wyshynski of ESPN, he put out tiers. And where Trent Frederick fell was the bargain contract tier of trade deadline guys. Justin Brazeau was a bargain contract tier as well. Mason Lohrei, 25 and under tier. That's a guy that they're going to keep and extend.
They have to.
Great skater, great vision. Just needs to improve his overall awareness on the ice, cut down the bad mistakes.
Had a great game on Tuesday, so he's showing strides.
It's just you want that consistency.
100%.
And what's important with the Lohrei is also when you have guys like Zadorov, McAvoy, Lindholm on your blue line for a long term, you need a young guy like Lohrei. Continue to learn from them. He doesn't have to be rushed into a certain role. Carlo is the one I always get caught on. That one for him, he put elite players with term tier, because Brandon Carlo, 26 years old, big defenseman, skates really well. I'm not ready to just write him off after a down year. That's a guy that's played well in the playoffs for them, shows a lot of promise. That's someone I would want to hold on to as a Brandon Carlo type player.
Yeah, I think Carlo should stay in the mix. I don't think Lohrei should be touched whatsoever. I mean, do you think there could be a package deal that can go between Brazeau and Frederick? Because, I mean, if you're looking at two bargain contract tiers and you're okay to move two of them along, you might need to bring up a development guy, or you'd be surprised what you'd get. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of money to stabilize your bottom six.
Yeah.
especially if you decide that one of those lines of your third or fourth line is going to be your physical line. And that's going to be the line that comes in and shuts down your opponents. One of their top 6 guys can keep up with them, wear them out. Like the structure can be so much more simple sometimes. And again, I'm sorry to use the Panthers as an example, but there wasn't a lot of money for them to play with heading into their Stanley Cup run. And you look at the pieces that they plucked for their bottom 6, and they were the top guys to try to help them out to get as far as they did in their run.
They knew how to, it was like a wave after wave crashing on you,
yes.
The way the Panthers played. What's tough is same thing. I don't know what Brazeau fetches. And maybe you have to put them together to get a better draft pick in return.
Right.
And something you could fill in. Because Frederic's, I think, 1 point his last 11 games. Brazeau's like scoreless his last 10. That's a tough part when you look at it. It's going into the deadline. You want him to be playing better hockey. This Bruins team just can't stay healthy.
Yeah.
And the Frederic, the timing of it just stinks. Like absolutely the timing of his injury. Because that was a key piece in it all.
Yeah. Do you think that do you feel like there would be a scenario in which it would be better to hold on to Frederic and try to do other movement?
Yeah, again with the cap space, I think he's a good player. But it's a matter of like, all right, what do you do to put talent around him? Because you have to fill out that third line, and that's a part of it all. It's all right. Do you need draft picks? Because are you going to kind of reset and go into like a reset year? I'm not going to say rebuild, like a reset year, because that's what draft picks are. They're prospects. But when you talk about a Carlo or a Frederic, those are guys that are like professionals I want to keep on my team and continue to build out with. Not guys that I want to deal, because you get someone else in there, you don't know what they're going to become. Those guys are like NHL players.
Yes.
Frederic's like one I want to build around, but it's tough of where the answer is elsewhere,
Yeah.
And it is along the if you look on the wings, like Nikolai Ehlers is one of the top free agents that'll hit in this offseason. That's a guy that could come in, play left wing. All of a sudden, you're a lot better on the sides, especially we don't know what happens with Brad Marchand after this season. But then it's, okay, so you have 3 good wings. You don't have that overall depth. And what we get into, too, it's like, okay, you bring in Ehlers, but does that make Frederic better? Like, you still have Patra in that role. That's what makes it hard.
You know who secretly I feel like should come in and could do some damage with them in a good way? Jared McCann.
Yeah.
I feel like he's the kind of guy who has the ability to elevate the players around him. He's got some sneaky statistics sometimes. You push in Frederic to the center, you let him come in at left wing, and now you're elevating that third line. And he shouldn't be that costly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe Lindholm, Zaka, Frederic, your top 3 centers. Maybe Patra, slot him in on that fourth line. Just finding a way, pieces of the puzzle.